This is the Precidio of Tubac, garrisoned by Spanish in 1752. The old Precidio of Tubac.
Remember I showed on the military record census, I showed his name as Espanol. This is where he was when that census was made in 1790. That was a few years ago. And then later when Sam came, Sam actually bought a ranch out here. We used to call it his Sonorita Rancha. So this is where he had his ranch, was right out here, which is right over that way, about 5 or 10 miles. But a lot of family history here. This is our Pima Indian.
What would he do on the ranch out here? What kind of
raising cattle? Yep, he took about 4 or 5 acres to feed one cow, but he had cattle and he had water. This is the Santa Cruz River, the same river that goes right through Tucson. This is the Santa Cruz River right there. So we're going to have a little movie. They're going to talk about the movie. And remember, there was that one drawing I showed, a sketch. It looked kind of like that in my talk yesterday. Yep. That's Tubac. But again, the Apaches got to him. Tubac, the reason why Modesto Lario had to leave here, they were military, but the Apaches became so bad that they actually had to move to Tucson where there was a fort to protect themselves. And they were the Spanish military. So the Apache Indians became very aggressive in the early 1800s. And so all of that and all of this all was abandoned. And everybody moved to Tucson. Well, those Apaches were bad guys. They were bad guys.
I feel like I'm doing a flyby.
Yeah. So Sam's place is... Yeah, this is it right there.
So that's where we're visiting too, to see that side.
This is the picture here. Check, this is the picture that they have right up there.
Yeah.
Take a picture of that, and then we'll make a slide out of it. It's too late now. I'm not going to give this talk again, but it would be nice to have.
Let me see this one.
He's going to shoot it from 20 miles up. There you go.
And remember, then Juan Bautista Anza was his commander. And they've got books on Juan Bautista right there. What they wore and how they wore it. That is how Modesto Lario Santa Cruz looked in the mid-1700s, about 1740, 1750. And remember, I showed you the military garrison record of Tubac, where we are right now, and it said Modesto Lario Santa Cruz, and what was it? Spaniard. So he came from Spain. Okay? So this is one of the first landing places of our Spanish line. It was right here. And then, if you look at the picture, that big color picture on the wall out there, you saw that last night in black and white. That big color picture there. And that was when Tubac was at its prime. But what happened in the very late 1700s, early 1800s, the Apaches got so bad. I need to back up. Remember that Irish Spaniard, okay, O'Connor, came up from Mexico, and he's the one that said, we're going to build a Presidio against the Indians right here. And they hired a bunch of the Indians, and they built the Tucson Presidio, right? And remember yesterday, Knox Corbett's house, the wall to his yard was the wall, the northwest corner of that Presidio. So we stood right there where that Presidio was yesterday. Okay? That Presidio was already built. Nothing but a bunch of Indians up there. So the Spaniards kept their military here at Tubac, because Tubac was closer to Arrecife, which was the big Spanish outpost that they wanted to keep the Indians away from. And so Tucson was too far away. The Indians just went around Tucson and then attacked the lower colonies of Spaniards. So they moved the military down here to Tubac to be closer to where the Spanish settlements were, to protect them better. Well, in the late 1700s, the Apaches decided that they were going to just take care of those Spaniards. They were just all white-skinned people anyway. Just take care of them in a hurry. So they attacked Tubac a couple of times, and they attacked them so fiercely that the Spanish military that was here to protect everybody, they said, we can't stay here at Tubac. The Indians are too bad. And they couldn't go back towards Mexico, down to Arizipe, or past, past Guivavi, because that was too close to the Spanish outpost that they were supposed to be protecting. They were supposed to be out there on the frontier, the macho guys, protecting, the Spaniards from the Native Americans, the Apaches. So Juan de Anza had no choice, Juan Bautista Anza, except that he had to move them up to Tucson so that they would have the walls of the fort to protect themselves. As a result, much of our family, including Juan Modesto Eladio Santa Cruz, okay, and his wife, and some of our Bohorquezes, and some of our Morenos and our Romeros are on that Tubac military garrison record. And so literally, our family literally moved from here up to Tucson, because there we had forts to protect us against the Apaches. And we were supposed to be protecting everybody else from the Apaches, so we got into the fort up at Tucson and said, no more arrows, guys, time out, just go away, Apaches, go away. Well, of course, the Apaches didn't go away, okay? And this is what Juan Modesto Eladio Santa Cruz looked like, and 2 or 3 of our Bohorquezes, one of our Morenos, and one of our Romeros from Spain. This is how they dressed when they were here at this place right here in the military garrison before they took tail and ran. I mean, before they were moved out here to Tucson to be in there. And so that's how our family got to Tucson. The Apaches drove us to Tucson, literally, from Tubac. So while our family was here at Tubac, all of our baptisms are done at Tumacocari and Guavavi, which are all just down the road from here. So that's why Tumacocari and Guavavi, remember yesterday I showed you the pictures of those two old churches? That's why, because our family lived here, because this was the furthermost Spanish settlement of all of New Spain. It wasn't Tucson. That was Pima Indians and Yaquis and Papagos up there. And the Spanish really weren't into protecting them much. They were here to protect the Spaniards. And so after that, moved to Tucson, then we get the Santa Maria Mission built, okay? Then we get the big Catholic nunnery built, and then once the church comes and it gets established in Tucson, now the military has no choice but to protect the church, because the church ran everything. The Catholic Church ran everything, including the military. Indirectly, of course, but the church was in charge. And so this was the home of our ancestors before the Apaches drove us to Tucson. And that's what they look like. You have 3 or 4 Spanish ancestors on that census that I showed you of Tubac, the Tubac military yesterday. I showed you the slide and I showed you their names, and this is what they dressed like. Except that this probably isn't true, because he looks pretty handsome. When you were out on the Spanish frontier, you probably had a few holes in your pants, they were dirty, because they were out here, they were out here riding horses, chasing the Apaches in the mesquite trees. And so they probably didn't look quite that pretty. That's what they look like. And that is, there was a sketch made by a Spaniard, and that color picture on the wall, I showed you the original sketch, the hand drawing of that. Someone has painted a picture of it. And that's what this looked like when Modesto Eladio was here. So if you want to see the streets that he rode his horse down, and the place, the church where he went, the little buildings that he went, that big color photograph out there, that was his Tubac. That's what it looked like, because Spaniards had drawn what it looked like in the late 1700s, and that's it. So this is the home of our ancestors just before Tucson, before there was a Tucson. Okay? All right. So I don't know what's on this thing. I have not seen this movie. Is everybody ready to play? Okay, everybody in?
Push the button.
Okay. Now I'm not very
Up on top,
minded.
on the screen.
Chuck should do this.
Just press play. Should,
I think you did it already.
Is it going?
There's a little sticky there, so it's like, I guess that doesn't work. Maybe we have to push that.
Okay.
That works.
The on-screen is faulty.
It lasts about 7 or 8 minutes. You have to watch fast.
Narrator Will Rogers Jr.
Will Rogers Jr.
Narrator is Will Rogers Jr.
Oh, really? Yeah,
When
it
the
is.
Spanish frontier reached Maria Alta, or what is now southern Arizona, 3 distinct lifestyles existed in the region. The Pima were essentially peaceful farmers who irrigated the rich valley soil, lived in settled communities, and nearly always produced a surplus.
That's your
of
ancestor.
agricultural goods.
Right
The
there.
That's what they really look
That's a
like.
Pima Indian.
Inhabited the harsh desert area to the west, and lived in somewhat less permanent villages than their linguistic relatives, the Pima, and practiced dry farming and food gathering in their vast domain. The nomadic Apaches were relative newcomers to the area.
Boo.
They lived
Yes.
in easily constructed shelters and rested a living from the land by food gathering, hunting, and raiding their more sedentary agricultural neighbors. The earliest Spanish explorers, such as Fray Marcos de Niza, Cabeza de Vaca, Coronado, had little impact on the natives, except for the introduction of a horse. Direct and far-reaching changes began in 1691, when Father Eusebio Francisco Kino arrived at the Pima village of Tumacacaray to establish a mission. As an institution of the Spanish conquest, the mission not only brought Indians into the church, but also introduced them to European crops, livestock, and technology. Officials in Madrid expected to transform the Indians into Spanish-speaking subjects of the king within 20 years. Carlos III, King of Spain, pressed an official policy towards the natives that was well-intended, and for that time, perhaps relatively enlightened. But the average Spaniard ignored it more often than not. And after more than 60 years of the stresses brought on by the cultural change, of seeing their best land appropriated, and of suffering the rash behavior of many Spaniards, the Pima revolted in 1751. It was evident that the Spaniards could not hold their northwest frontier with the forces then available, so a Presidio, or fort, was constructed at Tubac in 1752. The 50 soldiers who garrisoned the new post were expected to bring their families and settle in the area, establishing Tubac as the oldest European town in Arizona. Although the Pima never again revolted, the soldiers were kept busy by the Apaches, who had discovered that running off Spanish livestock was a lot more rewarding than raiding Pima villages. With a population of around 400, the Presidio became for 2 decades the social and cultural center of the region. But a distant threat to Spain's New World Empire brought yet another change. The Russians had established Fort Ross, only 70 miles north of the Bay Area in California. In order to forestall their further advance down the west coast, the commander of Tubac Presidio was commissioned to find an overland route to the coast. In 1774, Juan Bautista de Anza and 20 Tubac troopers became the first persons of European descent to journey overland to the Pacific coast. And in 1775, de Anza again made the journey, this time with 240 colonists who founded the city of San Francisco. Believing that the remaining Tubac civilians could now fend for themselves, the colonial government moved the garrison north to Tucson. But Apache raids increased until Tubac was abandoned. In 1786, the Presidio was re-garrisoned, this time, ironically, with Pima soldiers under Spanish officers. Another period of prosperity followed, and the Apaches were kept relatively quiet with a liquor subsidy and other supplies.
Liquor subsidy.
Still do.
Mexico won her independence from Spain in 1821. This had little immediate effect on Tubac. But the new government faced many problems and was unable to maintain an effective Indian policy on its distant frontier. The Apaches again took to raiding. Gradually, but with ever-increasing pressure from the Apaches, Tubac began to decline. And the discovery of gold in California drew away enough population that they were able to overrun the town. Survivors fled to Tucson and Magdalena. American 49ers passing through described Tubac as having been recently deserted. At this time, however, it was apparent to the U.S. government that one of the best transcontinental railroad routes lay through the Mexican town of Tucson. In 1854, the Gadsden Purchase was consummated, giving the U.S. a railroad route through most of what is now Arizona, south of the Gila River. Yankee enterprise entered the area in the form of the Sonora Mining and Exploring Company, with Charles Poston as superintendent, and with headquarters at the old Presidio at Tubac. A boom followed, which increased the town's population to around 1,000 inhabitants. There were 2 hotels, a store, and in 1859, Arizona's first newspaper. The Civil War rudely ended this short-lived era of prosperity when federal troops were withdrawn, leaving Tubac once again to the Apaches. Following the war, the town was slowly resettled, and in 1885, enough people lived in the area to require a one-room adobe school. But Tubac remained essentially a small agrarian community with a strong Mexican personality until well into the 20th century. Following World War II, artists and craftsmen saw the crumbling adobe ruins and the magnificent scenery and began to settle the town. In 1958, the old Precidio site was given to the state as the nucleus of Arizona's first state park. Today, the Presidio remains recall more than 100 years of Spanish rule in the Santa Cruz Valley, and they also recall a time when a traveler just hadn't seen modern Arizona unless he had been to Tubac.
That's our ancestors, the Pimas and the Spanish. And we probably have a little Apache blood in us too, because some of the Apaches were friendly Apaches, and they also intermarried in Tubac and Tucson. So whenever your mother gets really upset, say, the Apache needs to go away and the Pima needs to come in. Because the Pimas were the quiet Apaches.
Well, that's why Mom always went on the warpath when we were...
That's right, when we were a kid. Actually, she never got angry with me. I don't know about you, Megs, but...
I
no.
don't.
Now you're welcome to go out and walk around. And make sure you take a look at that picture, because that picture, that was Modesto Ladio Santa Cruz's Tubac. He lived here for about 15 years.
In about 5 minutes, we need to be in the cars heading out again.
And so just kind of roam around the
Where'd
Presidio
you
a
come
little
from?
bit.
We're waiting for you guys.
And we're going to take off again.
Margaret.
Each time he went out on an Indian raid or whatever.
Okay, this is the ground plan. This is the main administrative building where the garrison was housed. Well, the officers anyway.
He was not an officer. He was a carbineer. So he was a regular foot soldier from Spain.
So here's what it looked like then. Here's what it looks like now.
Have you tried it? Hi, good morning.
Where have you kids been now?
Well, we got lost.
Yeah, that was 45 minutes out of it.
Yeah, so we... yeah, we finally found it, and then we kept getting cut off Mom's cell phone, our cell phone.
These walls built about 1910 on top of the Presidio foundation. And this is what's left. Now we're going down into an excavation exhibit below. We'll see what's there.
Here it is, 1766 map, it says.
Interior Precidio wall in the dirt here, it's still there. They didn't take it out.
Yeah.
Just left it there.
And some bones too that you left in, some rabbit bones.
Yeah.
Lizard bones of some kind.
We can just go down another 200 feet, you'd probably find one out of 8 maybe.
Yeah. We're down 250. We're down 250 years.
Yeah.
A few more, we got it.
You're the man to tell us how far to dig.
This is pretty cool. This wasn't here when I was here about
Is that
20
your
years
next little
ago.
bullet too?
1750.
Wow. Oh, so that's all stuff that I found.
This is where they use those tiny little brushes to brush things off to see what it is, you know.
I have a lot of patience because I want to just tear
Yeah.
things out of their mouth.
I'd stumble all through it and ruin all of it, you know. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think I blew it. It's still on record, so I must have missed this. This is the 1766 Presidio plan. We are down 2 stories to come down to the excavation level of the original Presidio. Interior Presidio wall, adobe brick, foundation stones, 19th century foundation. What's interesting is over here, it actually shows the layers. We have a 19th century floor up here, and as we go down a foot, about 2 feet, we get an ash layer, which is the Presidio floor level. And as you can see, here is a log, part of the burnt out log. You follow the 19th century layer over, and you have glass sticking out. There's glass there sticking out.
It's hard to stay on that time scale. And you've
Up
got
this
people
way.
waiting, people have to go hide.
And these, some of the things that they have found. Spanish-Mexican 1752, it says, to 1854. And we'll hurry through this. Indian heads, bones, pottery, glass implements, an old razor. This is American, 1854, 1974. And there's your old grinding. These were found in 1974 excavation. This is the old grinding mill, and that is where they would lash the horses to push the grinder. Come on, Liz, give me a push.
Are you calling her a donkey or a jackass?
Better be a donkey.
Oh, they both were. Hit her, go ahead, hit her, go ahead.
This is a replica of what it must have looked like back in the 1700s. I know we're pretty close here. There we go. Get out of the sun. Pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. In fact, I'm going to zoom in, get in the shade. There we go. Now you can see the implements that are inside underneath.
Away from the artifact.
And the pen where they kept the animals. This is Father Kino.
Father Kino. That's the reason why Tubac came into existence, because he had a church here, here, and a Tumacoquery and a Guavavi. And that's where our ancestors came.
Now, this is pretty cool. This is a replica of the fort.
Oh, that is cool, isn't it?
We will do a flyby.
Did you get the saddle, Patty?
Oh, no, I didn't get this one. I got the one over the other one.
Does that look very comfortable, that saddle?
No. Mine protect the horse somewhat more than ours. Maybe it was for protection.
This is a display on the Hohokam Indians, AD 200. Hohokam, a modern Pima word for vanished ones. We'll just do a quick through here. There's a lot to see. There are common communal dwelling places. Known for their basket weaving. Father Kino, we have him. Now we're into the Spanish period. The old Spanish helmet. The sword hilts, is that what they call those?
Those are handguards.
Handguards. Old cannonballs. Precidio. The San Ignacio Tubac. Guess I could get it on the middle. So that is the original spear head. Wow. There's an old picture. 1752. And wow, the saddle. Juan Bautista de Anza II. More military gear. You've heard the history, I won't worry about repeating the history. This is an interesting picture. Spanish chair, chest. Now we're into the Mexican period. The old oxen yokes, or maybe human yoke, doesn't really say. Probably human yoke for the size of them. Beautiful, beautiful Indian colors. Woodwork. Doesn't say what these are. Pottery of the time, probably 1800s by now.
Found in St. Anne's Church, Tubac,
Under renovation. This cannon over here looks pretty cool.
in Tubac.
Cannon, the old table.
We found it, yeah, in St. Anne's Church.
That is cool.
Isn't that neat? And look, it's inscribed and everything.
18.
It says in memory of
1916. Oh, in memory of.
Sidney Quinn, died December 1916, yeah.
That
I'll
is
be
cool.
darned.
This is the kind of thing I'm used to seeing in Catholic masses.
Yeah.
Is this kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that we usually see.
I'm just breezing right on through. I'll pass by you guys here in a second.
Talk about
Oh, check this
teenage
out.
love life. There was none, man.
Check out the entrance.
There it is. That's Modesto Eladio and Romeros and Morenos, all of our family soldiers, all went in and out of there.
And then there's what it looked like.
That is home.
Drawing, and there's the picture.
Ada Nash was born in 1850, and that is 1858.
So just 8 years.
8 years after she was born, so she probably saw that when it was in its prime.
Yeah.
When she was a young teenager,
You
she
see
and
the thing
Sam.
about St. Anne's Church back there? It's on the written, talk about the little church you were talking about.
There's the Confederate period, 1865, 1861.
You better do it quick because they're pushing us out the door. Here, stop up here. You keep going with the case.
The dig. And these gentlemen, Tubac citizens from the past. Oh, Ortero. Ortero was one of ours. We have Ortero in our blood. Should we read that? Rojas. I don't know that we have any Rojas. If they're here, they're probably related somehow. Bustamante. Anselmo Bustamante. 1856. Just more. Here's some pictures.
Just doing it for 45 years.
This is El Alferez Don José María Sosa. Don José María Sosa. Second Company of California of the Presidio Real San Ignacio de Tubac, 1774 to 1810. This is Ansa, I'm sure, with the beard. Oh, Tubac Jail. Leg irons are from the Tubac Jail. We are now at the Tumacacori National Historic Park.
Tubac 1822, Bonnie Hundley, Scottsdale, Arizona.
1822. Many of the same things we've already seen at Tubac, so we'll go through this quickly. Priest in his gown. Oh. Mass, 1820s. La Misa. Representation of what the chapel looked like, I'm sure. Three-dimensional. Very interesting.
Can I talk?
Sure.
And this is the chapel at Tumacacori where we have the original Catholic records back in the 1760s from Modesto Lario Santa Cruz and his family, where they baptized their children, was right here and at Guavavi, a few miles down the road. So that's the chapel that 250 years ago our ancestors came in and worshipped, and where their children were baptized and where they came to Mass. That's what it looked like. That's cool.
A representation of the chapel?
This is not the one right out here. This is something different.
Read what it says. What does it say?
On the sign.
No two missions were alike. I can't read it with the reflection. San Ignacio?
This is the Mission San Ignacio, 65 miles south of here. Oh.
Ape amde tetum totkum öniga kumpapor. Matata seo foketa ila. Detta ono kodo ke seo por ke ali. Porque ka o kutoko hakai. Mama ka mom ki ka mahepa. Yeah, the milk, hi. Go on, not do this time.
My grandfather used to tell us stories about when the black robes first came to this place. One of our people had heard about the black robes villages south of here. Down there they were growing many new things in the desert, and they had many cattle, and everyone had plenty to eat. So one of our people went to the black robes and asked him to come up here and show us these things.
Nadia.
Chapchigi.
Ja, Tina,
Paptoki.
This timeless desert in the 18th century was the northernmost outpost of the Spanish Empire. Jesuit missionaries had begun the difficult task of civilizing the frontier by establishing a chain of missions, centers of learning for the Spanish culture and the Christian religion. Several hundred missions were built along the river valleys from Sinaloa northward to the Gila River and the valley of the Santa Cruz. The pioneering work of the Jesuits was cut short in 1767 by an edict from King Carlos III suppressing the Jesuit order, and the black robes were deported. Coming to take their place at the northern outposts were the gray-robed Franciscans.
Terminando esta página de mi diario, me ocurre cómo era cuando vine a esta misión de Tumacacori. Hace ya 13 años.
As I finish this page in my diary, it occurs to me that I have now been here at Tumacacori Mission for almost 13 years since my arrival in 1794. We Franciscans and the Jesuits before us have progressed slowly and with great difficulty. Our children of the mission still do not dress themselves decently and persist in their pagan customs. The neighbors of the mission, the settlers, which increase in number year by year, even encourage these devilish customs for their own entertainment. The Jesuit church is falling into ruin, and in spite of the poverty, the great poverty of this mission, in recent years we have been struggling to build a larger church, one more adequate for our purposes.
Work on the new church continued off and on for nearly 2 decades. Its bell tower was never completely finished.
Oh my God, why he purpose month? Oh my God, why he purpose Jude?
Matilde oikein tämä katsoa.
Ya vénganse niños, ya es hora. Muy tarde. ¿Dónde estaban? A ver cuántos somos. Pues falta una, ¿verdad? Aquí viene Matilda. Sienta ahí. Tú sabes dónde. Ahora vamos a aprender la doctrina. Primero siempre, al principio, rezamos. Por eso de pie todos. Ahora hacemos todos juntos la señal de la Santa Cruz. Ya sabemos hacerla. En el nombre del Padre, y del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo. Amén. Ya siéntense. Unas preguntas. Sabemos todos las contestaciones, pero tenemos que pensar con las cabezas, ¿verdad? La primera pregunta, ¿cómo se llama el Hijo de Dios, quien nació en Belén? El Hijo de Dios, ¿cómo se llama? A ver quién sepa. Bartolo.
Jesús.
Muy bien, correcto, Bartolo. Y ahora una segunda pregunta, pero esta vez a las muchachas, porque tiene que ver con las muchachas. No es muy difícil. Vamos a ver si sabemos. La segunda pregunta es, ¿cómo se llamaba la Madre de Dios, la mamá de Jesús? Matilda, ¿cómo se llamaba? A ver quién sabe.
María.
María, perfecto, correcto, muy bien. Y otra cosa que vamos a aprender, un poco más difícil, es confesarnos. Confesarnos, como hacen sus papás.